Wahoka. So, my name is Aaron Watts. I am a former expedition navigator. I've been pretty involved in the program for the last, 8 years or so. I've got 3 daughters, part of the Sunshine Nation. And now I kind of operate as a... thank you, expedition. You're going to find out why I have such a hard time with these new terms of expedition versus nation in a second. But in any event, I've got 3 daughters. I'm going to be in the program for a long time, so I've got an 11-year-old and I've got a 6-year-old, so that means this thing is going to go forever for me. I love every minute of it. And I think a lot of the reason why I love every minute of this program is because I did it when I was a kid. So I was a guide when I was a young pup. I did it with my father. I was a nation chief back then. I got a good appreciation for the program, and my father kind of schooled me and my other 2 brothers through this program, and now I'm doing it with my daughters. And so I get the privilege of actually getting my dad out here today. And we've asked him, myself and Michael have asked him if he'd come up here and share a little bit about what it looks like generationally, because it's obviously passed down to me. I'm passing this program on to my kids, and he passed it on to me, and I think that it's a great thing for a relationship. It's brought me a lot closer with my dad, and certainly it's brought my daughters a lot closer with me. So without further ado, Richard Watts, better known as Big Bear. Big Bear. And let me just say also for a second, we do utilize the terms expedition, we utilize the term circle for good reasons, there's no question. But this is a different generation, so he's going to use terms that we don't want to use going forward, but something that he's familiar with. So if he uses terms like nation chief or nation, there's a reason for that, because back when it was Indian guides, that's what he did. So, thank you.
Thank you. Love you, son. I'm really happy to be here. I'm proud that I was asked to come and to chat with you a little bit about what I know. And I do remember back 35 or so years ago when I started in the program, and it was different. There were just different names, right? I was nation chief. There were tribes, there were campouts, things were named after Indians. There was a lot of Indian Olympics and things like that. But it's still the same program, I can see that. But what I wanted to say to you, first of all, is I have a great friend of mine, psychologist, that once said to me, he said, if you really want to get to know somebody, have them tell you something about themselves they don't want you to know. So if you want to really get to know me, I want to tell you something about me that I don't want you to know. And that is that there's no way in the world I was going to be in this program when I started. I had no desire to be in this. It's called Indian Guides then. My wife signed me up when Aaron was 4 years old. And I thought it was crazy. I thought the idea of a bunch of dads meeting and putting feathers on their head and doing crafts and getting together and camping out was the silliest thing I'd ever heard. And she signed me up anyways. It was $40 for the year for Aaron and I. And we went on our first couple of outings with our tribes. And if I was to fast forward just a couple of years, 4 years later, I was marching down the streets of Fullerton in the Founders Day Parade with loincloth, feathers, spear, boots up to here, with 200 children behind me, all under the age of 9. And we won the Spirit Award that year for Fullerton for their Founders Day Parade. Quite a transition that went from one thing to the next. But I wanted to say too that when we started, it was a small group. It was dwindling. I think that my ambition was not only just to be with my son, but to help grow this program for others. And that took an intentionality about being involved. It took friends of mine that I talked into doing things they didn't want to do. And my best friend, who I talked into being in the program, who after I was nation chief, I made sure the lineage was good going forward, so that we had, the next guy was excellent. The next guy after that, Billy Noble, Great Eagle, was excellent. Pat Kennelly, I know these names from 35 years ago because
That's
they
my
were...
dad, Pat Kennelly.
No way.
Yeah. I'm Brendan Kennelly.
Oh my gosh, look at there. Yeah. I'm gonna have to talk to you afterwards. You're gonna find out. That's just, and these are exceptional people that really did a great job to keep this thing going. And you see, that example is something to me that just is what it's all about, right? It's about creating a generational cycle that allows parents to get close to their kids. And you know, dads sometimes are a little bit awkward with their kids. We had docs in the program that were not very comfortable hugging their kids. And as Nation Chief, I was explaining a little bit earlier that that one of the things that I would do is when I was doing the aims, you had to do the aims for memory. And we would go off with the Nation Chief and we'd sit in the forest and they would have to recite the aims. And it would make these kids' mouths go dry. It was just so tough for them. But they did it and we helped them through it. And what I would always say as I left, I would say, now you have one more thing you need to do, and that is I need you to run to your father who's out there pacing. I need you to jump into his arms, hug him, and tell him I love you. And that one thing created an indelible mark on so many dads that they came to me afterward and said, I never hugged my son before that one time. And then it became so natural and so normal for them to do that. So, you know, again, I really do believe the program is very similar to what it was before in theory, right? The concepts are the same. The other thing that I would say is that we all talk about, everybody here in this generation of the world is keen on investments. We're always talking ROI. But we never really think about the idea of investing in memories. What would it look like? What story do you want to tell? How do you invest in a memory that isn't here yet? How do you create a story now that's going to be told at some point in the future? And more importantly, what story do you want to tell? There's a number of my friends now that at my age have said to me, I gave away the first 10 years of my life to my business, the first 15 years of my life to my business, the first 20 years. I was so invested in making money and being successful that I didn't realize the fallout that would occur as a result of that in my kids 20 years later. Now they're 65, 70 years old. They're retired maybe. But the kids, they say they can feel the difficulty that they have because there weren't these simple moments that were created that made it easy later on. Made it easy. So the idea of investing in memories, I literally make stories in my head. What would it look like? What could I do? What one little thing could I do back then to make something a little bit more special than another? Now, some of the things that we did, you can't do now, I don't think. But our fall camp out, which we had then about 300 to 400 dads and sons total, big group. Our fall camp out was a bonfire that was unlit in the center of a group like this. And the guys that were the engineers in the group would take a cable and they would anchor it into the middle of the fire, soak it with kerosene, and they would run that cable up into the Joshua Tree rocks about 100 yards. And that's a big cable. It takes a lot of tension to hold that cable into the rocks. So of course we're drilling right into the rocks, which you probably go to jail for that now. And then the nation chief, which would be your leader now, would stand in front of the fire with all of these young kids. And he would call on the Great Spirit to come be amongst us for our campfire. And everyone that knew what was going to happen would see a little light just fire up in the rocks. And it was 100 yards away. And then this fireball, like a comet, would come down. It was a pulleyed 8-foot piece of 2x4 that had a rag on the front that was soaked, like a big match. And it would be lit, and that would come flying down at a 45-degree angle. It would literally make the adults that didn't know, and all the kids, jump right out of their skin seeing this thing come down. And when it hit the fire, it was all soaked, and so this thing went up with about a 10, 15-foot blaze. And the indelibility of that thing on the kids was absolutely astronomical. It was one of those deals that they talk about it. I have, you know, the sons of the Kennellys and whatnot, those kind of people come up to me now and they say, oh my God, the campfire. And that was just about what might we do to invest in a memory that we can look back on at some point in the future and say, this was so worthwhile. This really created a memory. I don't even recognize that I had an understanding of how important it would be. But it did. It really became something that, as Aaron got older, I could see him doing the same thing with his kids. And interestingly, I continued this story making because it's now in my skin. It's part of my bones to create these stories for family. And so I've done the same thing now with my grandkids, his 3 daughters. Last night, we were on the beach together camping, just me, 5 grandkids. We had ice cream, we had popcorn, we watched Pirates of the Caribbean, and it is our 8th annual, and McLean's the oldest, she's only 11, almost 12. She was 2, almost 3 years old when we did our first camp out. It seems so cheesy, but I took a chance that in the ROI of investing in that memory would be something significant. And 8 years now later, McLean in particular, who's become a young lady, has this relationship with her grandfather that I don't have to talk about. I don't need to use words to talk about it. I can get the hugs, I get the closeness. I'm so comfortable with her and all my 5 grandkids because it becomes really important to recognize that investing in those memories is something that you just always get this return on. It's just a constant return. So that's part of the process here, right, is to go more than just attending, to do something more. I mean, I watch you guys doing stuff we never even did already. I mean, we didn't do this barbecue stuff. Best we ever did was hot dogs. We had 400 people, and we did hot dogs. And most of them fell in the dirt at some point. Nobody could tell, and we just picked them up and ate them. But we had so many campouts. And I want to tell you about when I was Nation Chief, one of the ones that Aaron was part of, because when I was Nation Chief, which is your leader, the child becomes Nation Chief also. So he's a little Nation Chief, and he was Little Bear, and I was Big Bear. And in the beginning of the ceremony at Joshua Tree, when it was my turn for the campfire, I decided to add more. And the more was, I grabbed a couple of aerial flares, Coast Guard flares, that when you pull on the bottom, it fires a .22 shell straight up into the air, goes up about 200-300 feet, orange flare, circles up on top. I thought, this is going to be great. I got to figure out how to do this. And so part of my ceremony was I took that little chain that's on the bottom of that flare, I tied a little cord around it, I took the cord and laced it down through my shirt, and I tied it on my belt buckle right here on the left side, tied it on my belt buckle on the right side, flare in each hand, which I kept in a top pocket, and now I'm going to talk to the Great Spirit and bring this campfire to life out in Joshua Tree. All I needed to do was measure so that if I got to here, it was tight. If I went to here, they fired. So I could raise my hands to the Great Spirit with both hands, and they would fire. So came my time, and there was a rock that you had to jump up on in order to get in front of this whole group. It was like you times 5. And I already had the flares in my hands, and I thought, that's a problem. So I stuck them in my pockets, here and here. Again, this is a great idea. I came up with this idea. And I stuck them in my pockets, and then what I did is with my boots on, I'm talking moccasins up to here, right? And the headdress down to here, which I made myself, right? I'm talking full-on headdress. And I leapt up to the rock with all these kids as I got introduced, only I didn't leap enough. And what happened was I caught my foot on the boulders. I was going to go up to about this height, run up the side. And as I started to go forward, I realized that if I stretched my arms out to break my fall, I would blow my balls off. And it all came to me in just one split second. And it was horrifying, and I've actually had nightmares about it where I actually did go ahead and blow my balls off. But everyone on the high command people, all the people in the circle, knew I had this stuff. And as I leapt up onto the rock, the only thing I could do was to keep my hands at my side and do something that no nation chief, no leader, had done to that date, and that's to do a head digger straight into the rock with a granite rock and hit my face, which took the skin off my nose and off my forehead. And I just kept on going. And I stood up, and now they thought I had war paint on. It was actually bleeding down my face. And I did the entire ceremony, and then I turned to the rock and I said, "May the Great Spirit," and I now grabbed them out of my pockets and I went like this, and they shot up in the air. It was just incredible. And the kids remembered that for so long, and including the fact that my war paint kept running down the sides of my face. But those are the kind of extra things that you do. And you suggest those things to somebody else, like I did to my older brother, who was the nation chief in the Yorba Linda group. And he went out the following month, same amphitheater, same idea with the rockets, and his were successful. He went boom, and they shot off. He didn't realize that the game warden was sitting in the audience watching the show. No, $500 then, that's 35 years ago, $500 fine for blowing off any type of pyrotechnics in the park at Joshua Tree. So Tom got a really big ticket. That was funny to me. You don't get to dig at your older brothers too often, but that was one of the wonderful days of my life to watch him take my idea and then get killed with it. So the last thing that I want to just leave you with is just the concept of how small this time is for you. I'm kind of shocked that I'm up here. It's a funny thing because I watched a couple of the older grandfathers in our tribe that kind of always were around. For some reason there was a dad that couldn't make it or wouldn't be there, and the grandfather would be there. And he was a guy that had been in the program with his kids, and now he was there, and I got thinking, gosh, if I'm ever that old, if I ever get white hair and silver hair like that, I'm never going to show up to a bunch of younger people and obviously be the oldest guy in the crowd. And yet that time has gone by so quickly. And it's been filled with wonderful memories with our family. It's been filled with wonderful memories of the grandkids. And I've planned a lot of other things. We've done a lot of wonderful travel in our family. The crazy thing is that I've really spent some serious dollars setting up things for my family to go do. Things that I've done with my sons, experiences that I've had with my sons in Africa and in Alaska and all of these crazy things. But when I hear them and they don't know that I'm listening, and people ask them, what was the best part of being with Dad? They always come back to this program. Somehow, this program trumps everything that we do in a commercial sense to try to make things happen. I think it's wonderful, but some of the smaller things, some of the intentional things, some of the relational things mean a lot. So not only is time fleeting and fast, but just to give you perspective, I'm now retreating back to a couple of things I used to say when I sachem, which was the wise man. I don't know what you call your wise man now, but the elder, right, the person that has been nation chief. I was in charge of giving the spiritual ceremony and talk the following day on Sunday when we would have our campouts. And I would always reference the speed of light. And that's what I want to leave you with, is just the concept of how small we really are in this process and how little time we've got to waste to make the memories that we need to make. The speed of light, I used to say to the little kids, the speed of light is 186,000 miles per second. So what? 186,000 miles per second. Oh, but that will go around the globe, the whole world, 7 times 1001. 7 times 1001. They kind of got that. They got the idea that that was fast. If you go around the sun, it takes 14 seconds at that same speed, 14 seconds to get all the way around. In fact, for the speed of light at that super speed, to get to the sun, 505 seconds. And to get from the sun out to Pluto, how small are we? 5.5 hours of traveling at that speed. 7 times around the Earth, 1001. 5.5 hours to get out to Pluto. And so here we have this little solar system where we get this honor of being with each other and caring about each other. And the solar system is one of only, there's 200 billion solar systems in a normal-sized galaxy. The Milky Way galaxy is 100,000 light years across. 100,000 light years. 1001, 7 times around the Earth. 100,000 years, we barely get across our galaxy. In our galaxy, there is over 100 billion that we know of galaxies in the universe. We are so tiny and we are so small. We have so little time. And I often say to my kids and to the young kids that were there that the nearest star outside the sun is Proxima Centauri. It's 4 light years away. The closest star we see in the sky at night is 4 years of travel at light speed at 186,000 miles per second. So, the nearest light that you see out there today is 4 years in the making. So if you see a star today and you're seeing light, look at it, I just saw it flicker. It flickered 4 years ago, if it's the closest star. And there's only one that's the closest star. And so I say to you, you know, this is not a time for us to, in this small little flicker, by the time the light that's generated from the closest star gets to us next, we will be so long gone here. We will be so long gone. And it's such a small, tiny, tiny measurement. So I would encourage you with that to be positive, to really be intentional in the love of your kids, and for goodness sakes, tell them that you love them. Be with them as much as you possibly can. Invest in memories. Make those as much a priority as the rate of return, because I'll tell you what, they've never gone down. The stock market is killing me right now. Those memories, the ROI for the investment that I've had at this stage, I can promise you, I look back right now and probably 90% of my joy is just having the contentment of knowing that I did the best that I could to create those things for my family. So thank you very much for having me, and have a wonderful time. Enjoy your program.